So as a follow-up from my weekly time frame analysis video that I just posted a few minutes ago, I am going to follow up with a shorter time frame analysis looking at the daily 4-hour and 1-hour charts for Bitcoin. So as you can see over on the daily chart here, I'm going to look at what happened in 2021 when we saw the same signal on the weekly chart. So currently we are 4 green weeks up and we are Wednesday morning for US, Wednesday evening for us Australians, and you can see here this was I guess you could call it a doji candle with a bearish bias. But if we jump over to here, take note that that candle opened on the 18th of October, so today would be roughly the 20th of October. You can see we did see this final push up at the start of the week, and we have now we've actually sold off one day early. This is sold off on the Thursday last cycle, and it sold off on the Wednesday. So I'm really keen to see whether we will see a further move down. If I pull up my fib retracement tool, you can see we've pretty much failed almost exactly on that short-term 50% level. If you watch Michael Pizzino videos, you will know that how important the 50% level is. So we've seen a failed retest. Now, if you watched Michael's video today, he talked about that level for this cycle being $119,000 roughly. And I'm just gonna show you guys my channel content here, all the behind the scenes stuff of my massive YouTube channel getting 50 views and 2 comments. But this video right here, he talks about, so if we fail at $119,000, I will expect a further sell-off, and that would also line up with a potential ABC correction. Now, if I go Elliott corrective wave, we're going to think about potentially that being an ABC. So something that looks like that. Obviously, the Gann swing indicator doesn't go back this many bars. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether that's just because I haven't set it up right or whether that's a limitation on the indicator itself. But even without the swing chart, you can pretty much see we've had a failed retest of the 50% level and we have attempted lower. So jumping back over to the present day, we can see that obviously I'm going to recreate what Michael has created. You can see at $119,400, we have that 50% level. So if in today's US stock market session, we fail at that level, I would expect us to potentially continue down lower to one of my previous trend lines, like this blue trend line, like you remember my previous videos, at $113,000, which is our 4th time breakout as well for this cycle, all our $100,000 plus cycle tops. And it has not been retested yet on the daily chart. And if you remember my previous video talking about a potential $1 billion liquidation day, as well as this correction getting into the double digits rather than just being a single digit correction, I definitely stand by my theory that I think it's very likely that we will fail at this level either today or tomorrow, because remember, timing doesn't have to be right, doesn't have to be correct to the day. And we can also see here that the stochastic RSI has not reset in quite a while. And if we look at the previous cycle, if I actually add my stochastic RSI indicator, you can see the stock RSI here, after being topped out for this entire run up, as soon as it crosses bearish, it basically needs a reset to pretty much 0, unless you get the bearish cross and immediately follow up with a bullish cross and continuation, which could absolutely happen if we start seeing closes and higher lows above $119,500, which Michael also talked about in his video today, of always going with the market. Like, my theory is my theory, but if the market tells me that I'm wrong, then I have to accept that I'm wrong. And that could mean, closing out my long at $119,400, expecting a rejection, but the price cuts right through, consolidates between 120 and 121K. I end up having to get in at a higher price, but I end up riding the trend through to who knows, 130k, 135k, 150k. So that's pretty much my analysis on the Bitcoin daily chart. And if we jump down to the 4-hour chart, you can see that we have broken the 2-bar swing bottom here. So if you are from TIA, you will know that that being a 2-bar swing bottom, that is technically a short signal. So if you were trading this strategy, you would have flipped long over here at $109,300, and you would have flipped short here at $117,000. Now, hopefully, if you were smart, you would have taken some profits as we approached the 50 TMA on the 4-hour chart, as well as 2 of my trend lines. So what I think is potential that we could, again, going with the market, we create a couple more swings, and as soon as we take out a 4-hour swing top, if it's above $119,500, I will enter long again, even if it means going in at a higher price. Now, looking at this pattern from a Wyckoff perspective, I do think this actually looks more like a distribution pattern than a reaccumulation pattern, just because this low here has gone below these lows here. And if we do see failure at previous highs, or worse, previous lows, like if the market doesn't even make it up to the 50% level and rolls over, something that Michael has talked about previously as being a sign of weakness, then I will definitely expect a B, C correction down to potentially around $113,000. Now, I am not wed to that price target. I am not shorting. I will simply add more to my longs if we go down that low, because my 5x long is not going to get liquidated unless we go to $98,000. Now, that's basically my 4-hour analysis, and I strongly encourage you to join either TIA Premium. You can find the links in Jason and Michael's YouTube videos in their video descriptions, or you can do your own study on Wyckoff, which for me has been one of the most important aspects of short-term trading. I apply it to 4-hour, 1-hour trades all the time, and I'm sitting on like 92% win rate for the last 6 months. So it really does pay off, and I've made like 3 to 4x portfolio return doing it, just using 5 to 10x leverage. Now over here on the 1-hour chart, you can clearly see, being a 1-hour chart and using a 1-bar instead of 2-bar, we do see lots and lots of changes of trend, but pretty much the story is fairly similar as a 4-hour chart. We have slipped below these previous lows. Ideally, for a very strong reaccumulation, I would have liked to see price reaccumulate above this $119,500 level, above all these previous tops and the 50% level. Actually, it wouldn't be a 50% level because we would never have broken back this low. So accumulation back also above the 50 TMA, as you can see previously, when you break out and you accumulate above swing tops and hold the 50 TMA as support, it often leads to another explosive move up. So this is, again, it looks like we are failing at the 1-hour TMA. Now, obviously, being a 1-hour TMA, you can see failure, and it quickly gets flipped as support and price continues upwards. So right now, I am just sticking with the market. Like, I've got my alerts set, my buy orders, sell orders all placed, and there's not really much more to do. So for the rest of this video, I'm just going to take a quick look at altcoins. You can see we have broken down from the wedge that I've been talking about, the rising wedge that I've been talking about for the last few weeks. We have now broken this trend line here, and we have closed a weekly candle below it. But one thing that I am suspicious of is the stochastic RSI is making a bullish divergence. And obviously, this is yet to be confirmed, because if this week can close somewhere nice and low at say 4% or 4.1%, we will invalidate this bullish divergence. Because as you can see, the stochastic RSI right now is probably going to make a higher low if we close at this point, because all my charts are run to candle closes, and the price has made a lower low, which is a sign of strength, and that could potentially line up with my weekly theory of us needing to take a breather for a couple of weeks. Now, moving on to XRP, you can clearly see since our weekly BX trender flashed higher lows or breakout, ideally for altcoins, I would want to try and front run the trend, because if you wait for confirmation of the breakout, getting in at 284 to ride it to 290 versus getting in at 220 and having a stop underneath 190, but your upside potential is 4 or 5 times what your downside potential is. So that's just the way I trade. On the daily chart, you can see that this swing is getting ridiculously long. Michael talked about that in, I think, his video yesterday or today, that getting in late on a move has risks because the last trade with the trend is usually a loss. So if you got in here, you might, put your stop loss under 280 for half of it and your other half under maybe 265. But yeah, like you can see, I have talked about this heaps in my previous videos. You see price break above the 50-day TMA, consolidate for a bit, and then you get this massive, massive move up. Ethereum, same story. We're still long on the daily and weekly charts. You can see we're above the daily 50 TMA. We are above the weekly 50 TMA. And for Ethereum, you can see even if you got in on the higher low at just under $1,600 versus getting in on confirmation of the breakout at just over $1,800, you would have still had a massive, massive ride. But the reason not everyone walks away from the market as a winner, even with a winning strategy, is because you see this massive move up and then this move down. So if you got in at, say, $1,800, you take no profits at $2,500, $2,800, then you see this big red move, you panic sell at $2,200 for a profit, so you're doing better than most people. But then you see this big move up, you buy in at the top, you see another correction, panic sell, you watch the market go back up, and you know the gist. Sell the dips, buy the tops. That's how most people lose in this market. I won't keep rambling. Solana, we are struggling a bit more compared to the other markets. I do see a somewhat inverted head and shoulders, but until we break above this $169 level and start closing daily candles, I just can't really see Solana doing anything incredible. Now, I think Jason and Michael talked about potentially flipping, was it $190 as support, so we can get above all the previous tops and previous bottoms. And obviously the weekly 50 TMA is lining up at $180. So Solana is not looking as great. It's still been a pretty decent trade. If you got in at, say, $152, you would have been up 10%, and now you're down up just under 10%. So not as wonderful of a trade as the others, and I personally would not be looking at Solana until it climbs a bit higher. I do have a position, but I just will not be adding to it until I see some more strength in this market. Over looking at the DXY, on the weekly chart, you can see we have seen this bullish divergence play out. I can't remember if I talked about that, but I think I did say that we looked a bit oversold and we might be testing the market bias, which is another indicator that Traders Helping Traders, Peter DiCarlo, talks about over at his community. And yeah, so we could potentially see a move up to $100, which would also, not $100, 100 points, which would also line up with my Bitcoin 2 or 3 weeks sideways with a potential flash crash theory. And there's really not much more to talk about other than I still agree with Jason and Michael's long-term analysis, with this being macro distribution and a failure at these previous lows of around $99, $100 as this line trends down a bit more would confirm distribution and hopefully get the US dollar going down nice and low so Bitcoin stocks and commodities can go through the roof. Looking over at Polkadot, Same story. We closed the daily candle above the 50-day TMA. We have made our way higher, and it looks like we are forming a double bottom on the daily chart. So looking over at the weekly chart, you can see your long signal would have been around $4, which is pretty much the same as your daily long signal. And I would expect continuation up to around $5.40. And as you can see here, if the weekly 50 TMA does not act as resistance and we cut straight through it, it means it's kind of an overbought market, and the price obviously can still go higher, but we're closer to a peak than most people would have liked, and we would be closer to something like this. Not a final cycle top, but a significant top, like our 74k top and our, like, what is it, 110k top, that holds the market down for weeks or even months rather than just, you know, days or weeks. And if we do meet resistance at, say, $5.40 and chop sideways for a few weeks, consolidate, then I believe our move up is going to be a lot stronger. And I do believe this is what's going to happen, because if you watch Michael's Elliott wave theory, he reckons we've still got a wave 3 that we're only in the beginning phases of, and we've still got a wave 4 pullback that should last a couple of weeks, and a final wave 5 blow off top incoming. CRO, we flipped this massive historic downtrend trend line as resistance support, and we have taken off from that point. You can see we've consolidated, we've had this huge move up, long signal on the daily 50 TMA, and we've continued to move up. Obviously this is a massive move, nearly 50%. Up there with some of the top performing altcoins in the last few weeks. So we are probably going to need to digest that move. So far, we're holding above these tops, which is a good sign. I do like to see consolidation above tops. And obviously, in this case, if you waited for the weekly move to confirm, you would have had a chance to get away with a profit, but you're now back close to a break even. And as you can see here, the weekly 50 TMA has acted as resistance many times, and a sharp rejection off it is usually not a great sign. So what I am hoping is for CRO at least, even if we see a flash crash, in the next few weeks, I want to see us cut through this to potentially have a parabolic run up, which is what I believe most, if not all, exchange tokens, such as BNB, MX, and so on, will do towards the end of the cycle. Now, this video is going on way too long, so I'm going to save the other altcoins for a separate video. But for a deep dive, a deep dive in a separate video, but you can see ADA, we are still long on the daily and weekly strategies. I'm meeting a bit of resistance on the weekly. BNB, same thing. Daily closes above the 50 TMA, off to the races. On the weekly, BNB does look like it is in a much better place than something like Solana, because we are very close to all-time highs, only around 10% off. SUI is on its absolutely huge run up, and it looks like it's meeting some resistance at previous tops. But as you can see, as soon as that 50 TMA strategy fired long, we just saw a 30% move up. On the weekly chart, breakout still looks pretty strong, but obviously we are meeting resistance. Rune, long, Grenda, long, Psy has been absolutely insane since it is fired long, I think up 50%. Pepe, fired long 50 TMA, met resistance at the 50% level. Looks like it's breaking through it. Bonk, again, you can just see how amazing this 50 TMA strategy is on the daily chart. And I'm not going to talk about this, I only looked at it because someone mentioned it in my Discord, but this just shows, even without applying Wyckoff analysis to the 1 hour and 4 hour charts, you can still make heaps of money just by looking at the daily and weekly charts. Because time and time again, people think this time is different, but cycles are always the same. Not exactly the same, but similar enough that you can study the past to forecast the future. I did not steal that line off Jason, by the way. Thank you all for watching.